Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, welcome everybody to this installment of the DeepRoots webinar covering best practices and brand expansion. To date, we've heard from a lot of edible companies that have moved into new markets, but today we're joined by one of the leading flower brands in cannabis, Old Pal, and its CEO, Rusty Wilenkin. Rusty, come on in and join us. That's excellent. How are you doing today?
Can't complain at all.
Excellent. Rusty, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. I think most companies in this industry or people in this industry have heard of Old Pal, but give us a little bit of an elevator pitch, a little bit of a background, and kind of where you are today in terms of market expansion, since that is our focus.
Yeah. So, Old Pal's a brand that we started back in 2018. Myself and my partner Jason had worked in the space for a number of years prior. And, when cannabis went legal in California, we saw a real opportunity to sort of brand the maybe premium value shelf, or however you want to refer to sort of, call it in the good, better, best method of thinking, like better. Everyone at the time was sort of looking at creating brands for the cannabis 2.0 consumer, and Candescent and Dosist were sort of the talk of the town. And, as someone that had been working in cannabis as a rep for 5-6 years prior to 2018, it felt weird to me that me and my friends had stopped buying cannabis legally, because there was nothing in the dispensary for us. And so we wanted to create something on the affordable side that was still beautiful and sort of showed the consumer we cared about the consumer that wasn't buying the most premium product on the shelf. So we started in 2018 in California. We never went vertical. We always partnered with cultivators. My background is selling and marketing cannabis, as is my partner's. I've grown weed in 2-car garages and things like that, but never at any real scale. And so for us, it was more of a partner with people that are great at what they do, us focus on what we're good at, and try to bring something to market that really shows the consumer we care about them. We partnered with a group out of Austin known as Land. They did Stumptown Coffee, Mountain Valley Water. They were co-founders in the brand with us, really took ownership of the creative side, made sure that the brand aesthetically was something we could be proud of. And so after launching in 2018 in California, we quickly became one of the larger flower brands in the state. And we sort of used that success to go license the brand around the country. Today we operate in 7 different markets. I'd say by the end of the summer, we'll be live on shelves in 12 markets. So, been pushing state expansion aggressively. I feel like we're still in the first inning of this business, and, being in front of consumers and sort of being early to these markets, I think, is how you can sort of establish yourself as a local player that's been there supporting the market from the get-go.
Yeah, indeed. I think what we're gonna cover off a couple of things that I think are going to be interesting in terms of partner selection, and really you're focused on sales and marketing in the case of Old Pal, heavy emphasis on marketing. But I have to tackle here, I think, what is kind of the elephant in the room, right? And that is that you have a very defined user base in terms of what you're trying to achieve, accessible, affordable, abundant, shareable cannabis. You're known for that ready to roll pre-ground flower, and culture is extremely important to you. But obviously you go into a new market, whatever that new market is, you have incredibly different supply chain and a different consumer. Talk to me a little bit about, how do you balance this kind of cultural focus that you have, that, hey, this is our way, this is what we believe in, and how you marry that going into new markets and having to put a shareable experience that is, affordable and good quality at a certain price point, day in, day out, almost like the CPG model that everyone's chasing.
Yeah, 100%. I think consistency in any product in the cannabis world is difficult. I think specifically flower products are the toughest. It's not a homogenized product at the end of the day. It's closer to a fruit or a vegetable than a juice. And, If you look at all the apples on the tree, they're all a little bit different. Um, but I think where we have done an amazing job is creating SOPs that our partners can understand to create products that are as consistent as possible. So, at the end of the day, indoor flower grown in Ohio and greenhouse flower grown in California are never going to be an identical user experience. It's just different starting materials. But when you think about turning those into products and how we look at them, you know, everything from moisture content to piece count to the fine to the granularity of the grind, all of those play into having a consistent product. And for us at this point, especially in our ready to roll product, which is sort of what we've become known for, you know, we have a machine we recommend to do that grind. We have a micron screen we recommend in terms of how fine we want that grind to be. It's a product that, when we launched, we thought was really simple, but as you start producing thousands and thousands and then hundreds of thousands of units, you start to realize all the different places where things can, become inconsistent. And so, you know, while we try to be as consistent as possible in terms of what the inputs are, the regulations don't allow that. So it's really working with the flower to take it to a consistent product is what we're doing there. We have a 10-step QA and QC process where we're scoring retention sampling. We're really walking our partners through all of the things that we're concerned about in terms of both user experience, aesthetic experience, and all the things that sort of matter for the products. In terms of the culture piece, there are some states that let us have as much fun as we want to have. And there are other states where, you need to play by their rules. And as much as I would love to go throw a party in one of the more medical markets and be smoking joints and sharing products, that's just functionally not allowed. In the medical markets, the idea of sharing medicine is not something that people really that regulators are comfortable with. In Pennsylvania and Ohio, regulators want this to be a medical purchase for a person that wants to treat their medical issue. And in those markets, we adapt to the regulators' rules. In Pennsylvania, when we first launched that market, the regulators decided that pouches didn't protect the integrity of the medicine. So our products were sold in really less than aesthetically pleasing drams. The states changed their position on that, and we're rolling out pouches this week, and it makes me really happy. But you gotta, if you want to be there, you need to play by the rules. Similarly, our pouches of pre-ground cannabis are known as ready to roll in every market in the country except Pennsylvania and Ohio, because those are smoke-free markets. In those markets, it's a pre-ground cannabis for vaping. Um, would I love to sell ready to roll in Pennsylvania? Absolutely. The regulators won't allow it. And so, for us, it's really, we want to be everywhere. We want to be interacting with the cannabis communities that exist today, but there are also limitations. And we know culturally, sort of, if you don't play by the rules, you don't get to be there. So, we adapt where we need to, and we try to push for the things that really matter to us. But at the end of the day, like, giving people great experiences with cannabis, bringing together communities, those are the things we care about as a company. And I think we've found ways to do that in most all the markets we operate in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some that are hampered a little bit, but you'll eventually get there. So you eventually find the model to convey to your end user, the consumer, a very consistent brand and philosophy. I do want to dig into, not all the details, but I want to talk a little bit about that 10-point QC thing in terms of flower selection. But before we go there, how do you feel about when you're talking to, various partners, potential partners, before you've chosen one? How does that cultural fit? How important is that to you, and what does that mean to you in a partnership? What does alignment of a cultural fit with a partner look like, or not look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say, like, when we look at state expansion specifically, um, an alignment at the cultural level is really important. And, you know, not everyone's always going to share the same political views or anything like that. And that's totally fine. But when I say cultural, our mission at Old Pal is to bring communities together with cannabis. We don't want to gouge a consumer. Our play isn't to, pull every penny of margin out of product. We want to give consumers an amazing experience that they love and they're excited about and they tell their friends about and that they want to come back for again and again and again. And some folks you speak to in cannabis are totally about that. They've gotten into this industry and they totally want to make money, but they also understand that there's a longer game here and that you can't just sell, bad weed for a high price and expect the consumer to keep coming back and smiling and taking it on the chin.
At one shot.
And then other groups, they're either not from the cannabis community, they maybe aren't from the CPG world either, and they're more from like transactional industries. And they just don't understand how you build that long-term value of like, Old Pal being a big brand is a value for us, but it's also a value for our partners in the markets we're in. It allows them a channel to sell product through. It's way more price stable in a commodity market. And so finding people that have the belief that, A, we're here for the long term, there's not some, we're not just building up revenue to go sell it to someone tomorrow. Like we want to build sustainable, great businesses. And B, like people that value that consumer is really just so important to us. Like someone that comes to mind is like our partner in Ohio. It's still a medical market, very restrictive in terms of what you can do. Um, if they get a bad review on Reddit, the owner of that company is biting his tongue to not respond to it. He cares so much about that brand, it hurts him to his core, and he wants to literally email that consumer and be like, "Hey, like I'm sorry this didn't work. What can we do to make it better?" I love that. Like I respond to a lot of our DMs until they take my login away on Instagram. Like, we really value customer service. I believe the customer is always right. I want to make the customer happy. And I think like folks that align with those types of values that sort of understand the importance of the people on the ground at the bud tender level, at the, brand ambassador level, consumer level, those are the folks we usually enjoy working with. Like there's a lot of people that got into weed seemingly because they thought they could do things better than stoners. Like the thesis of like a smart person that doesn't necessarily love the plant but sees these stoners making money and thinks they can go do it better. Those folks like usually don't value the consumer, bud tender, manager the way we do. And like at the end of the day, I still think this is a very people first business, and we like to work with people that share those values.
Yeah, so you've got like, making money is okay, right? I mean, it doesn't, it's not all about making money, but we're all in this to make a profit and stay in business, and surviving right now is winning, right? So I mean, when you look at your partners, you're kind of looking for what's a little bit deeper. Like, yeah, we all want to make our margin and we want to succeed. We're all sophisticated in terms of our desires, but at the core, it has to be kind of inside you, in your heart, like what you want to stand up and stand for.
And just like the belief in brands and the power of brands, like it's there's a lot of different people with different views on how this whole business and world will shake out. And there's a group of people that really believes that, regardless of the regulation, regardless of all the change, like at the end of the day, brands are going to be super important in this industry. There will be consumer loyalty, there will be price stability, and a lot of that starts with the brand. And so aligning with folks that sort of understand and believe that has really, been great for us.
So let's go over to the practical side of things, right? You meet somebody, you tour their facility, you smoke some of their weed, you get a sense for where they're going, how they grow directionally. You mentioned like a 10-point QC,
Yep.
platform that you have. Talk a little bit about that, because I think anybody, we've all heard stories of other brands and even MSOs and then in some cases are called out for putting a mediocre product on the market at a high price point. Have you had any experiences where, I don't want to say recalls or things like that, but what happens as you go through this process? I mean, you can't be in 7 markets at once. What happens if a bad batch comes through the process and then into your product and you're not satisfied with it? Talk a little bit about the challenges of going to market in 7 markets, soon to be 11, with flower probably from all over those markets. How do you
Yeah. So, a lot of it comes back to working with great partners. I would never lie, like we've definitely had batches go out into the world that we weren't proud of and had to deal with that. I think historically, those were in the very early days of Old Pal before we added such an amazing operations department. The first 6 months of this company, it was like 4 or 5 people in a WeWork screaming at each other. And, it's just functionally impossible to QC 2,000 pounds a month with like 5 or 6 people.
Right.
Doing all the other things that are involved in running a
but it's
business.
hard.
And, I think we were probably too growth focused and things slipped through on the quality side. At that point in time, though, our SOP is for, an eighth was probably 1 page long. Our ready to roll SOP was about a page also. Today those are 15-page bilingual documents with photos. They're, from start to finish, we're setting our partners up for success, whether it's simply saying, hey, put on a hairnet and a beard net if you look like me. Doing the basic steps of wash your hands before you sit down, like all of those little things that in the super early days, when the people packing weed before 2018 were sitting in my living room, it wasn't too hard to like, hey, dude, go do this, go do that.
Right.
So the SOPs on the front end set us up for success. The trainings we do with our partners in terms of what we look for set us up for success. But then our 10-step QC process that starts before the batch goes into production is huge. So we're visually inspecting the product either virtually or on site. Our partners screening that product, making sure there's no imperfections, things we don't want, etc. We're checking for moisture content before things go into grind or into packaging, because the moisture you start with is not the moisture you end with, and just understanding where you want to finish helps you know where you can start. We're really stringent in terms of freshness and pack date, all of the little things that go into a great consumer experience. And then we're holding retention sampling. So even if we don't get to go there and see a batch in person when it's being produced, we're out there seeing our partners' facilities probably once every 6 weeks, going through the batches that have gone into the market, scoring them. And like, to the extent something doesn't hit our specs, there's new trainings, there's coaching sessions, there's sort of repercussions, if you will. Because the goal for us is to have a really high quality product across the country. And to your point on the getting called out thing, a really bad review of our product in California affects sales in Massachusetts. So, our job is to make sure all of our partners across the country are doing a good job so that no one is negatively impacted by someone else. And so it's sort of a always work in progress in terms of training and new people coming through, but we've done a pretty great job of keeping the quality up across the country over the past couple of years. And I think like it's all due to our ops team is with our partners on the phone all the time, sort of screening batches and making sure things do hit our spec. And it's one of the best benefits of being a non-vertical brand. Like owning a cultivation, it makes life easier. Owning a retail, it makes life easier. But when you own a cultivation, if you grow a bad batch of product, you have to sell it to someone. Old Pal doesn't necessarily have that same trap, if you will. We can say no to a batch that doesn't hit our brand specs. And as our ops team has cracked the whip on me of not, compromising, it's led to a much more consistent, higher quality product in our bags.
You are I'd say one of the more focused companies in the industry. You know what you are and you know what you're not, and you've stuck to your knitting. You haven't chased, oh, everyone's going vertical, I'll go vertical too. That must be the way to better margin and profitability and whatnot. You've been very focused, but take me through that progression of like, where were you, 4 years ago when you went into your first market expansion, and what does that market expansion experience look like now? I mean, your team, right? Because it's what you do. It's expand the brand. That's almost a myopic focus of yours, is to expand the brand into new markets. And so take me through the progression of, was it a little loosey-goosey in the beginning and now it's like
Oh
totally
yeah.
buttoned down? What learnings did you get along the way?
Well, I wouldn't say anything we do is totally buttoned up, but we've gotten pretty sophisticated over the years in terms of how we manage markets, how we launch markets, and how we think about markets. Um, Admittedly, in 2019, when we expanded, the biggest reason for that was me and my partner Jason had no interest in going vertical. Assets at the time were incredibly overpriced, but also it goes back to like sort of knowing your strengths. Um, Jason grew up in New York City. I grew up on Long Island. Neither of us are exactly like from farming families or from like
Right.
agricultural backgrounds where I think we'd be set up to go run a large scale farm. And even in 2018, Old Pal was already selling a scale of cannabis that growing would have been a serious undertaking in and itself. Um, so for us, in order to avoid any pressures to go vertical, we wanted to make sure that we were really focused on building the brand. And, you know, a brand isn't built in one state. It can start in one state, and there's a lot of arguments about which states or which cities matter for building a strong brand, but you can't stay in one state forever. And so for us, when we looked at the business, like, hey, we started Old Pal as a licensing business. We were already licensing it out in California. We were never buying and selling weed. And so through that lens, the only way for us to expand was either more brands or more markets. And while we definitely think we can create more brands and we have the infrastructure at Old Pal to power a number of other brands, um, a brand's not built in 6 months or a year, even 2 or 3 years. A brand takes time. And, small team, we wanted to stay focused on one brand. So the thought was to build one of the first national brands in cannabis. We saw Cookies starting to do it. We sort of saw that, you know, there was a consumer out there that was really into the cannabis culture, whether it was through buying wearables or swag or things that weren't sold in dispensaries. And we wanted to find a way to really build that national brand from the get-go. And so as soon as we sort of had an inbound opportunity to license the brand into Nevada, we kind of jumped on it. We went out and took a tour, met the people, saw the facility, and the facility was a bonkers state-of-the-art greenhouse that had every bell and whistle on it under the sun. So it made it pretty easy to be like, oh, we should work with these people. They definitely can grow our product. Um, and that deal came together like fairly organically. We knew what we wanted, but it was probably one of the first licensing conversations we'd had. And so it just flowed very quick. They weren't really big cannabis people. They didn't really know the consumer. They were coming from a produce background. We knew the consumer, sort of had a brand that was resonating in California, and the idea of exporting it to Nevada just made a lot of sense to both of us. Um, so we just sort of did it. There wasn't a roadmap. We didn't necessarily have a team set up to do it. We hired one person in the market and started running. And we quickly learned like sort of where we fit in and where the partner needs to fit in. And like what I tell people today is like we focus on sell through, and we like to work with partners that focus on all the stuff up to sell in. So it's, you know, we can't go grow weed for a partner. We can't place weed. Like they need to be able to do the basics of being the brand and distributing that product in the market. Where we come in is really merchandising strategy, quarterly assortments for tabling, a brand ambassador team, like really pushing product, making sure there's velocity, making sure there's demand for that product, and making sure the brand feels real. Um, and today, when we look at expanding, we vet our partners so much more. We're way more deliberate. the questions we ask on the front end of like, how many other brands are you working with? Do all the brands have their own genetics? How do you think about strains? Like, you know, in the early days, I'm under the impression like you can't do something until you start doing it. And like we really wanted to start licensing the brand and expanding across the country. We didn't want to have to buy assets, and it felt like a very logical move. Um, at the same time, you know, it was definitely less thought out and deliberate than it was today. We had a really impressive group show up that was interested in licensing the brand, and we saw all the opportunity and ran through it.
I love the correlation between the vision of the company of it's just weed, man, right? And maybe your first licensing deals in other markets kind of followed that, you know, like it's just weed, man, right? And but now it's like, no, it's not, it's just weed, man,
Yeah.
from a public vision perspective. But behind the scenes, we got to deliver it. We got to deliver
And
good weed
there's,
at a good price.
you know, there's a lot of nuance to it. And I'll say, like, it's a challenge. Sometimes you really want to be in a market and you have to say no. And that's something that, like, our ops team has done a really good job of beating into me with a stick. Like, I've believed it. You know, I've always wanted to be passionate about every single thing we put out and feel good about everything we put out. But, you know, I even like we're launching the New Mexico market like basically next week. And when we were originally out there looking at launching, it was almost a year ago, and the partner showed us a warehouse full of weed, like over 1,000 pounds, and was like, "Can you guys do something with this?" And I was with Carter on our team, who runs our sort of supply chain, and you know, we're like sitting there opening garbage bag after garbage bag full of weed, and you know, we're sort of like, "How old is this? Like,
Right.
like it just like it wasn't it." And we ended up saying no to that batch, and you know we're launching with that partner now next week with fresh weed. And he was saying to Carter last week, he's like, you know, I really respect that you guys said no to that. And it's like, yeah, like you can't come into the market and just trash the brand, take advantage of the consumer, and sort of hope it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
Um, Launching the right way with the right product for the market's really important for us.
It has to be affordable for the consumer. It doesn't have to be affordable for you, right? I mean, ideally it is, but you know, you're not going to put crappy product in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's just for us, like at the end of the day, like we don't own a cultivation, we don't own retail stores. The one asset we own is this brand, and so we need to treat it very precious, and what goes into it needs to live up to that standard.
What is the op when the ops team comes to you and say we've done the due diligence, this one's a no, Rusty? What are is it all? I mean, is it mostly the quality of the weed, or what are the other hard no's that you get from your ops team? And maybe it's, you know, maybe it's just a market maturity or compliance, or who knows? But what are the other
It's
hard no's
almost
on like not time for
it's
this?
almost never market related. You know, if regulators make a shitty market, we still want to be there. Do we want to overly invest? Do we want to kill ourselves to thrive? No. But like if the consumer in a market's looking for Old Pal, I'd love for it to be there for them.
Right.
So like that's not going to be a hard no from our ops team. A hard no from our ops team, sometimes a partner just can't like actually do the sophisticated work of producing finished goods. Some folks in the space are far more akin to producing bulk goods, and the extra work to put a label on straight, make sure everything has a tamper seal, heat seal everything, they'd rather just not do it. And that at times is hard, really hard to work with, but you just, you know, you got to call a spade a spade.
Right.
Similarly, like big red flags for us are like if a partner has a value brand of their own, um, understanding how they're thinking about priority, how they're thinking about pricing us relative to their own brand. All of those things are really important. And then genetic variety, like we're willing to, and like we do genetic licensing for a few folks we work with, but to the extent a partner can't actually produce enough variety to power their portfolio of brands, and they're selling 6 different brands, all selling the exact same strains and the same configurations with different logos, it's just not a real compelling partnership or selling story. So really like understanding how they think about variance is really important to us. Um, and then the customer service piece, like some folks get that and some folks don't. And I don't know how to say that differently, but there's a cultural mindset of the like trying to deliver on your customers' like desires and wants in a way that helps them grow their own business versus simply working for your own objectives. And so, you know, those are sort of the red flags that come up and things that they point out. Um, it's typically not a skill thing either. Like we can teach people to produce almost everything, almost every SKU we make. Like it's not wildly difficult. Our products aren't the most complex in the industry. You know, we have proprietary ways we do certain things, but rolling joints isn't rocket science. Like making ground flour isn't rocket science. To the extent someone has the right attitude and is bought in, we can definitely teach them how to do the things we need done.
Yeah. You know, there are in big buckets, there are two types of partners. There's the co-manufacturer that just makes your product, and maybe they have a sales capability, logistics, or what have you. And then there's another brand partner. So you have two paths. One is a co-man that's going to just make what you need, and hopefully they'll support your sales. We'll come to kind of sales and marketing in a moment. And then you'll have another partner that has product in the market under their brand. You've been now in 7 markets. You're rolling up to 11. When you look at that, do you have a preference, or are both fine? It's just the skill sets that you're looking for of sales, for example. What are the drivers behind, like, oh shoot, like these guys are a brand, they're really good at selling in, but they've got a competitive product where we are. I'd love to work with them, but that's going to be hard. Versus like, oh, that's a great co-manufacturer, they grow great weed, but they don't know how to sell because that's not what they do. Now we've got to do that. That's a hard no. How do you like look at those two scenarios of a
We're
brand partner versus a co-man?
we're typically only working with brand partners. Not all of our partners have brands of their own. Some do, some don't. But um, like I believe in portfolio selling. Maybe it's because I worked for a guy that came from big beer for a long time. But you know, the idea in my head of one person walking through the door to sell one brand to the buyers in the more mature markets is just like it's crazy today. They have so many brands on the shelf. It's just they'd be getting harassed by so many people.
Right.
And so I really do believe in the portfolio strategy. Now, that being said, like you don't necessarily want to be in a portfolio with 30 other brands doing exactly what you do. So, you know, working with partners that have differentiated portfolios of brands is definitely more our speed. And I'll say, like, you know, our Ohio partner's done a great job of that. They have different brands that are leaders in each of the verticals. I think our Mass and Pennsylvania partners have done that as well too. With, you know, they have like Her Highness, a female like cleaning brand. They have Heisman, more like athletic, premium. They have Old Pal. They have Arrow. It's like with differentiated offerings, and like I think that's where you start to really see success in the portfolio of complementary products. And so those are the folks we like to work with. Um, Co-manufacturers are great, but you, at least in my mind, deal with an accountability issue when you're doing 11 different states. It's you want your interests aligned with your partners. You don't necessarily just want to be their customer.
Interesting. Interesting. We talk a lot about product market fit as it relates to you looking at the data in a market and determining, okay, here's the sweet spot for my brand. But we don't talk a lot about product market fit in terms of selecting your partner. And you guys actually spend a lot of time at looking at how does my brand fit in your portfolio. And I imagine you've had some experiences where, you know, maybe it's a more of a nascent brand that you're working with that wants to leverage Old Pal to get their product on the shelf, and like there's a lot of scenarios that go into that. But I think you've got an interesting focus of how do we fit within the broader skills of a brand and add value to their processes such that it's a win-win. Because at the end of the day, you're looking, like you said, for sell in, and then your job is sell through.
Yep. And it's that thing of like the right partner makes all the difference in the world. Like you said, we're in a bunch of different markets. We're not able to sit there and have the finger on the pulse all day, every day, the way our local operating partner does. And we can support the directions they want to go. But, if you own retail in Massachusetts, you have way more data on what's happening in real time than we do sitting in California trying to build the marketing to support. So, if next month we need to run a 15% off sale, or if we need to come out with some limited edition SKU to just sort of drum up some demand, we can do all the things to support that, but we sort of need the guidance from our local partner to make it happen.
Yeah. Nice. So let's talk a little bit about, because you focus on marketing, sell through as opposed to sell in. What, when you look at your marketing initiatives, at what point does that really start for you when you have a partnership? When do you start marketing? Are you actually marketing already before as you're gearing up, or are you kind of just waiting to get into the stores?
Digitally, we start marketing ahead of a launch. We'll start, so like our Old Pal Provisions clothing line, like we'll start running geo-targeted ads in the markets we plan on launching ahead of a launch. Like we'll start pushing awareness ahead of the launch. You know, Typically we hold on PR or big marketing initiatives around the launch until there's actually built inventory ready to go. We've just unfortunately had the experience of people doing a deal with us for a press release before. And so, that's a really shitty experience for the consumer and for us, where we announce we're launching a market and then never do. So, we typically hold on big pushes until the product is basically ready to go to market. But there's a lot of planning from the get-go, from making sure we have our street team identified and ready to go support events, making sure we do know where we're going to throw a launch party, like securing all the pieces to make it work. But we sort of hold for press and go until we're like softly live in the market. Like as an example, we'll do our first deliveries in Illinois, I think Friday of this week. The press release and sort of like all the fun around that launch will start to happen like mid-June.
So your goal is to seed the market and have certainly some people coming in and be like, I heard about Old Pal, you got Old Pal yet? And it just makes the sell in, your partner's job easier as you focus on sell through. So you spend, is there a direct correlation then between how much money you've spent on a new market in marketing and the success of that market? Is there like a minimum threshold that you need to get to? You realize that we've got to invest this much money in this market, or it's just gonna, it doesn't sell itself?
I'll say it's really market dependent. In markets where there's just no biomass, when you launch, it works. Like when we launched in Ohio for the first time, our partner there is a dominant player in the market. I think they're one of the larger cultivators. They have great reputation. I think when we launched out there, we were in like 58 of the 60 stores or 65 stores within a couple weeks, just because functionally our partner was very well known. We went on the menus and the product sold. Had we done no marketing, I think we probably would have been in all 58 of those doors. We still did an event support and did all the things to sort of like make it fun and do what we can. It's also, Ohio's very restrictive in terms of what you're allowed to do to support. But we've continued to support the market, investing where we can, building displays, doing the marketing work. Whereas when we launched in Las Vegas, we threw a massive party. We rolled out a lot of stops, and that was needed for that market. So I think it's really market dependent there. Like I'd love to say there's a one size fits all of like spend $20,000 and become the biggest in the market, but it's really a lot of it's what you're allowed to do, as well as just like in some of the bigger states, you need to think creatively because a bud tender that works in Tucson might not be coming to an event in Phoenix the way, if you throw something in Maryland, it's not too hard for most everyone to get there.
Right, right. When you are engaged, sometimes you might be engaged with multiple partners in the same state, like in the valuation process. Do you put together a kind of a pro forma of like, this is what we should be able to do here? And so is there like I don't want to say an attached business plan to the agreement, but where are those kind of negotiations around performance benchmarks as it relates, of course, to like, look, we're going to perform too. I'm going to spend this much money on marketing. So how does that whole thing shape now in your model of like, let's sit down and put some numbers to this, to define what our expectations are?
I'll say like we're really fortunate to have so much data now. Having launched 9 markets of all different shapes and sizes, um, there's no direct correlation. Like New York is not New Jersey, is not Connecticut, is not California. But you can look at population sizes and number of tourist traffic and start to like back into like, hey, we viewed this market as successful, we spent X, we think you should be able to do that here, and start to have those conversations. Those are always, I'd say one of the tougher parts of the negotiation. And admittedly, they're usually really telling about who you're working with. Some people put out really high numbers because they think it's just going to make you jump and sign the contract. And other people are a lot more thoughtful and conservative. And just seeing how people think through that is always pretty interesting.
I think it's critical, right? I mean, I always say that you should literally have a session with your partner devoted to what if things go wrong? Like, what if this happens? What if this happens? Because you're going to find out right there intuitively how these people respond and how they think about those challenges. And if they're trying to blow smoke, you're like, I don't, I've been there. Have you had? I mean, I don't even know. Have you had to change partners ever?
Yeah, for sure. We've had to do it a handful of times over the life of the business, and you know, I'll say like we say it to partners in negotiation on the front end, and they usually don't listen, but like it's the last thing we want to do. Um, as a brand, when you think about the things brands do, consistency is one of them in a big way, and specifically in like the call it premium value space, like everyday availability is really important. Gaps in supply, inconsistency in supply, different supply doesn't really fit the ethos of a premium value brand delivering an everyday product at a great price that consumers love. And so, we work with our partners through almost anything to the extent we can. If a partner is simply not paying their royalties and selling as much old pal as they can, like
Right.
yeah, we have to sort of go separate ways as a business at the end of the day, but um, it's really the last thing we want to do. I know of some folks that have done that proactively, thinking this partner will be better for my business than the one I have. And our experience is typically if you can work through whatever the issues are, it's way better than having to move just from the sake of, disruption to the thing. But, we've had to move markets or move partners in Arizona. And, I think our new partners stellar. There were some gaps that just happen when you make a move like that, but it's led to a way higher quality of product being, way more widely available.
Nice. Would you, I mean, given that you're so focused on the marketing component, that's your obligation, you're building your brand. What would you say in your experience, maybe is there one single most important thing that you need to do to light up a new market from a marketing perspective? Or is it like a 3 thing? Like what's the short list of
I
what?
think it's getting local, like more than anything. Like the quickest realization we had when we went to Las Vegas and launched Old Pal out there in 2018 was like people didn't want to buy California cannabis in Las Vegas. They wanted to buy cannabis brands in Las Vegas. And, from that day forward, our sort of like messaging around the brand pivoted to national brand, national brand, national brand, not California brand, California brand, California brand,
Interesting.
because the people in these local markets have a lot of pride in the market that they're working in the market that they've created. And the person that's engrossed themselves in the Ohio market or the Nevada market doesn't know about the California market the way that people in California do. And so coming to them and be like, hey, this is really cool in California, you should sell it here is a pretty shitty pitch. We try to hire local people, we try to be a part of the local community, support the local community organizations. When we do give back campaigns, they're never national. So we partner with our local partner in that market to find a charity that aligns with the values of that market and Old Pal. The consumer that walks through a dispensary door in Ohio, Nevada, and California cares about different things. And we want to speak to our consumers on the things they care about. We have our own values as a company, but we like to find places where those meet our partners' values in their local places.
That's great. We talk so much about being authentic, and there's this, there's often a belief that authenticity means that you go back, 10 years or what have you. But there's a very fine line between being authentic and arrogant, right? It's my way or the highway. I'm one of the leaders in the biggest cannabis market in the world. Let me just roll into your state and show you how to do this. When you're like, no, that's not going to work. We have to embrace the local community, and communities right up front in your value proposition, right? So you get local, you act local, you behave like you're part of that community. That's got to go a long way towards customers saying, oh, that's a California brand. I didn't even know that was a California brand.
And not to toot our own horn, but we are pretty authentic just in terms of having done it for a long time too. I think I've sold weed since I was like 14 or 15 years old, for better or for worse. Like it's been a it's been a long time brewing, and my partner, like even just thinking to California cannabis, like I was working for Kiva in 2014 as one of their first sales reps out here. My partner Jason started his brand Native, I think the end of 2013. Um, we've sort of been doing the brands and cannabis thing for a really long time, and like cannabis plays a huge part in my life and my wife's life. Like, you come over our house, it's everywhere. Like, we really are practicing what we preach to a degree. Like, we believe in bringing people together with cannabis. There's folks over our house way too often smoking weed and eating good food. And, I think it's like a big part of our life, and why, when I get local and go to the markets and meet people, like it resonates and they get that we're not some super corporate mega company trying to go build grows in 40 states. We're really trying to find ways to work with people that believe in what we believe to bring the brand across the country.
And how does that translate in your ability to convey that message to like bud tenders in Ohio and like the corner of the state? I mean, how is that Instagram? Is it, what are the marketing?
It's Instagram, it's in person, it's email, we sort of put the work in, and it's really fun for me to go to these local markets and do ride-alongs. Like my background sales, I've always done sales. It's what I do for fun. And like I'll say like meeting the people that help sell our product is always an awesome experience for me, but they're usually pretty stoked to see who's on the other end of it as well. Like they're usually a little bit surprised that it's we are who we are and we're not something a little bit more corporate.
Yeah. Do you feel that there has the strategy been always lead with the flower, land and expand kind of thing, where now like once you're in, you can have gummies, you can have other form factors? Do you feel the pressure to land with, and I'll even go down to like the ready to roll pre-ground? Obviously you mentioned Pennsylvania, you can't do it, but is there like a pressure to say, guys, we have to start here? And then we can grow? Or are you looking at product market fit and being like, wait, we could roll into this market with a gummy?
We're product market fit to a degree. I think like, look, there's some markets you can't even sell flower, and we're still looking at them. But when we look at a market and we start to look at investing heavily into launching and like really the big picture of what it is we want to do, um, the pre-ground flower and flower are pretty important. I'd say our convenience products in general are where we tend to focus. So call them our pre-rolls, our blunts, and our pre-ground flower. Um, we love full flower. It's what this industry is built on. It's what I grew up smoking. But you know, when we look at the things we do where you walk in, you're like, whoa, Old Pal's doing that, and that's what I know them for. It's more the pre-ground flower, the palitos, our packs of joints. Um, a lot of people do flower and do flower well, as do we. But the need to have is more that ready to roll, the blunts, the stuff where we really stand out.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, then so my last question here revolves around the word scale, right? You've
Mhm.
actually scaled up of the 7 markets where you're selling flower. Have you hit scale? And what does that even mean to you? Because I think people have different conceptions of like scaling up means infrastructure, what have you. But what does scale mean to you? And have you achieved the level of scale that you would expect? I mean, in California, have you achieved scale in California?
For sure. I think in California we have achieved scale, like, doing business with hundreds of retailers, selling thousands of pounds. Like it definitely feels like scale at least. Like I don't know what it is. We've sold a couple million units of cannabis over the past like 5 years. So just in terms of like numbers, like if you had told me that 5 years ago when we were starting the company, I would have laughed. Like it would have been like, whoa, no way. Like, it's crazy. Um, so like I feel like scale. I also know scale is completely relative, and like, when we were selling 100 pounds, it felt like scale. Um, I'll I also think it's really market dependent, like what you can sell in California versus what you can sell in Ohio versus what you can sell in Maryland versus Pennsylvania. They're just completely different total addressable markets.
Yeah.
Um, for us, we like to creep into being a top 50 brand everywhere we go. I know that doesn't sound all that high, but in the grand scheme of vertical natures, when you're competing with folks that own 30 retail stores, it's harder to build a bigger brand than theirs because they make sure theirs is the biggest. Um, but really, it's breaking into that sort of top brand category. It's always being a digital leader. When you look at the national brands, like Old Pal typically ranks in like the top 50 on the Pioneer Index. And when you look at the people next to us, their market caps are typically like 400, $500 million. And we're like, oh, well, yeah, that's cool that we're doing this in a way more
Yeah.
reasonable budget. Um, but I do think we've achieved scale in most of the markets, and we tend to achieve it pretty quickly. But it's really hard to quantify in like a method that scales across the country, if that makes sense, just with all the regions being so different.
I mean, it's oversimplifying it, but does it like, do you hit a certain number of SKUs and be like, okay, I've scaled, I've got 50 SKUs, I can't do any more or whatever? Or is it, like, are you always adding new SKUs, even in California now? Are you swapping things out? What's that?
We swap things out. I don't really think about SKUs as scaling up so much as I think about like available supply and number of retail doors. Like, do we have the ability to service 50% of the doors in the state, 75, 100, and then how many placements we have? I think the last I looked, we're at in like maybe 12 or 1300 retailers across the country. So, you know, in the grand scheme of like total doors, I don't know where that stacks up. It's not an
Yeah,
easy data point to find, but it feels pretty scaled.
great. Well, look, I mean, fascinating insight, fascinating strategy, and you're executing. Are there any, for the people out there that want to partner with Old Pal, what's next? What's on the horizon? Where are we going? Where are the opportunities for you?
Yeah, so I mean, we haven't really done a whole lot of press or spoke about it yet, but Illinois, New Mexico, Missouri all launch within like the next 2 weeks for us.
Nice.
Um, I'm from New York, and that market's really interesting to me, despite the regulators, attempts to create a thriving market and it not being one yet. I still think it's a like to the conversation of where brands are built, it's a really important market. And being from there, I selfishly want to see us thriving there. So I think we'll
Yeah.
probably be there sooner than later as well. Um, And then we're laser focused. I've been really looking for partners in New Jersey and Florida. Those are two markets that like I'm sort of dying to find a path into for our brand. And it's really taking it with the regulators, if you will. As markets open up, we want to be there. Like I said, there's sort of no market where we're like, no, we would never. With the right partner, we want to build one of the most recognizable national cannabis brands, and you need to be everywhere to do that. So, hopefully we get an international deal done this year. We've been talking to some folks up in Canada, and really just continuing to push and go where this brand can take us.
Well, you are clearly executing. You are well on your way, and so we're all going to enjoy being able to walk into any state and buy some ready to roll pre-ground flower or whatever other form factor you put out there. So kudos to what you've achieved. Good luck in the future, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our crew here today. I think everyone took a lot out of this. I know I did. So appreciate you coming on, Rusty.
Thanks for your time, Eric. Have a great day.
Yeah. And thanks to Miller's Insurance for sponsoring this webcast. And again, stay tuned. In June, I believe 28th, Jamie Mendola from Air Wellness comes on board to talk about the MSO partnering strategy and how they partner with companies like Rusty's. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and to be continued. Peace out.